Adoma and Chi were two beautiful sisters whose bond transcended the typical sibling relationship. At 28, Adoma worked as a nurse in a small city hospital, her hands healing strangers while her heart carried the weight of responsibility for her younger sister. She was strong-willed, sharp-tongued, and fiercely protective, the kind of woman who would walk through flames for those she loved. Chi, at 23, was her complete opposite. Where Adoma was hardened by life's trials, Chi remained soft and hopeful. She studied law with bright eyes and an unshakable belief that the world rewarded kindness. Her laughter filled their small apartment like music, her optimism a constant light in their modest home. Life had not been gentle with them. Their parents had died years ago, leaving the sisters to navigate survival alone. They shared everything, meals stretched in at the end of the month, rent split down to the last naira, dreams whispered in the dark when bills seemed insurmountable. Their apartment was cramped, with peeling paint and a ceiling fan that rattled more than it could, but within those walls lived something precious, love that asked for nothing and gave everything. They carved joy from hardship like artists shaping beauty from stone. Quiet dinners at their scratched wooden table became sacred rituals. Soft jokes after exhausting days became their therapy. Whispered plans about the future, Adoma opening a small clinic, Chi becoming a lawyer who fought for the voiceless, became their fuel to keep going. Despite the struggle, they never felt poor in spirit. They had each other, and that made them wealthy in ways money could never measure. Adoma would return from double shifts, feet aching, only to find Chi had prepared her favorite meal with their meager groceries. She would stress over exams, and Adoma would sit beside her, quizzing her until dawn broke over Lagos. Their neighbors knew them as the inseparable sisters, the ones who walked to the market together, attended church together, and faced the world as a united front. In a city that could be cruel and unforgiving, they had built a sanctuary in each other. But sanctuaries, no matter how carefully guarded, can be invaded. And sometimes, the monsters don't announce themselves with fangs and claws. Sometimes, they arrive with charm, wealth, and a smile that hides the darkness beneath. Frank entered their lives like a storm disguised as spring rain. He was everything Chi's sheltered world had never encountered, smooth-talking, impossibly wealthy, and dangerous in ways she couldn't yet recognize. His expensive cologne announced his presence before he did, and his designer suits cost more than 6 months of their rent combined. He pursued Chi with calculated precision, appearing outside her university with a luxury car that turned heads. Fresh flowers arrived at their apartment weekly, roses, lilies, orchids that seemed too beautiful to be real. He texted her good morning and good night with clockwork consistency, asked about her day with apparent genuine interest, and made her laugh until she covered her mouth shyly. She transformed in his presence. Her cheeks flushed pink when his name appeared on her phone. She spent extra time choosing outfits, borrowed Adoma's lipstick, and hummed while getting ready for their dates. For the first time in years, she looked not just happy, but cherished. Adoma watched this courtship with the wariness of a soldier who'd seen too many battles. She observed how Frank's charm never quite reached his eyes, how his generosity seemed performative, how he asked questions but rarely listened to answers. Something ancient and protective stirred in her gut, the same instinct that had kept them safe when their parents died, when landlords threatened eviction, when the world tried to break them. "Be careful, Chi," Adoma warned one evening, folding clean hospital scrubs with deliberate precision. "Not every smile hides good intentions. Some men are wolves in expensive clothing." Chi's response came soft but certain. "I know, Ada. But he's kind to me. He treats me like I matter." That response worried Adoma more than defiance would have. It revealed how starved she was for affection beyond sisterly love, how vulnerable loneliness had made her, how easily kindness, even false kindness, could breach her defenses. Frank's presence grew in their lives like ivy, beautiful but invasive. He took Chi to restaurants where one meal cost their weekly food budget. He promised trips to places she'd only seen in movies. He spoke of a future so bright it blinded her to the shadows gathering around them. Adoma's unease intensified, but she held her tongue. She was an adult, capable of making her own choices. All Adoma could do was remain vigilant, ready to catch her sister if, when, she fell. She didn't know that the fall would be a plunge into hell itself. Friday night arrived with deceptive normalcy. Music thumped from Frank's idling car outside the apartment, bass vibrating through the walls. She emerged from her room wearing a simple dress that made her look younger than 23, her smile belonging to someone who expected the night to be magical. At the door, Adoma held her sister's hands longer than usual. The gesture carried weight neither acknowledged aloud. "Please don't stay out too late," Adoma said, fighting to keep the tremor from her voice. Frank's reply came easy, practiced, "Don't worry, Adoma. I'll take good care of her." Those words would later echo in Adoma's mind like a curse. The door closed. Footsteps faded. Silence invaded the apartment like a living thing, cold and suffocating. Adoma stood frozen, listening to the car engine fade into Lagos's nighttime symphony of generators and distant music. Something felt catastrophically wrong, but she couldn't name it. Sleep refused to come. She lay on her side, then her back, then sat up in darkness that felt too thick. She made tea that grew cold untouched. She rearranged books that didn't need arranging. Each passing car made her glance toward the window, hoping to see Chi's familiar silhouette. The clock mocked her with its slow progression: midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3. She prayed in fragments, "Keep her safe. Bring her home. Please, God, just bring her home." The prayers felt like throwing pebbles into an abyss, hoping for echoes that never came. Dawn arrived gray and reluctant, as if ashamed to illuminate what the night had concealed. The sound of keys in the lock made Adoma's heart leap and plummet simultaneously. She stood in the doorway, but she wasn't Chi anymore. Her eyes were swollen nearly shut from crying. Her dress was torn at the shoulder. Her hands shook so violently she couldn't hold her purse, which slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a sound like a judge's gavel. No words came. They weren't necessary. She crumpled into Adoma's arms, and the sound that emerged from her was barely human, a keening wail from somewhere so deep that Adoma felt it in her bones. She held her sister, one hand on her back, the other cupping her head, and felt the wall they'd carefully built together crack down the middle. "I'm here," Adoma whispered, tears streaming down her own face. "I'm here." The police station smelled of stale cigarettes, old paperwork, and indifference. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow-green tinge. She clutched Adoma's arm so tightly it left marks, her entire body trembling as they approached the front desk. The officer behind the counter was a man in his late 40s, barely straining against his uniform, eyes already glazed with boredom before they even spoke. He barely looked up from his newspaper when they arrived. Chi's voice shook as she tried to explain what happened. Each word seemed to physically hurt her, forcing its way through lips that wanted to stay closed, wanted to pretend that night never existed. Adoma felt her own heart breaking again with each stuttered sentence, watching her sister relive her nightmare for a stranger who couldn't be bothered to care. "Do you have any proof?" the officer asked casually, turning a page of his newspaper. "She's the proof." Adoma's shout echoed through the station, making other officers glance over briefly before returning to their own business. "You need to arrest Frank and his friends." "Calm down, madam." The officer raised his hand dismissively. "You said Frank, right? Frank Dyke." Recognition flickered across his face, and Adoma's stomach dropped. He actually smirked. "He's a good man. Contributes to the police welfare fund." Maybe there was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. Adoma's voice cracked with fury and disbelief. "My sister was raped." But her words hit a wall built from corruption, money, and a system designed to protect men like Frank. The officer waved them away like flies, already returning his attention to his newspaper. His body language communicated clearly: your trauma is an inconvenience, your pain is irrelevant, your justice is not for sale at a price you can afford. Adoma returned the next day to follow up, refusing to let this die. The desk officer looked at her blankly, shuffled through some papers, and shrugged. "What report?" "There's nothing here under that name." The fire had vanished. The crime erased. As if that night never happened, as if Chi's broken spirit was just an unfortunate accident that left no paperwork behind. Walking out of the police station into Lagos's harsh sunlight, Adoma understood with crystalline clarity: the system would not save them. Justice was not blind, it simply refused to look at women like Chi. If they wanted justice, they would have to take it themselves. She stopped talking. The sister who once filled their apartment with laughter and dreams now sat by the window for hours, staring at nothing. She barely ate, pushing food around her plate like a child's reluctant game. Sleep eluded her, and when it came, it brought nightmares that had her gasping awake, drenched in sweat and silent screams. Adoma tried everything. She took Chi to a counselor whose platitudes about healing bounced off her sister's deadened expression. A pastor prayed over Chi with passionate fervor, but the words seemed to evaporate before reaching her. At a prayer house, women in white garments sang and danced, but Chi sat motionless, a statue among the faithful. Nothing worked. The light in Chi's eyes had been extinguished, and no amount of professional help or prayer seemed able to rekindle it. One evening, Adoma came home to find Chi sitting in complete darkness, not even bothering to turn on lights as they surrendered tonight. The silence was suffocating, heavy with all the words Chi could no longer speak. Adoma dropped to her knees before her sister, wrapping her arms around Chi's unresponsive body. Tears streamed down her face. "Please don't give up on me, Chi," she whispered against her sister's shoulder. "Please." Chi rested her head against Adoma, empty and numb, present but absent. That night, something in Adoma calcified. Grief hardened into purpose. Helplessness forged into determination. "If the law won't give us justice," she whispered into the darkness, "then I will." The transformation began methodically. She sold her jewelry, the gold necklace their mother had given her, the earrings from their father. She sold their mother's carefully preserved fabrics, each piece a memory she wrapped in tissue paper before letting go. Her father's wristwatch, his only valuable possession, went last. Each sale felt like cutting away pieces of her old life. With the money, she bought a new wardrobe, elegant dresses that clung in ways her nurse's scrubs never had, heels that changed her walk, wigs that transformed her face into a stranger's. She studied makeup tutorials until she could sculpt her features into someone unrecognizable. She practiced a new voice, softer, more seductive, stripped of her usual sharp edges. In the mirror, Adoma watched herself disappear and someone else emerge. Her name became Layla, a woman of mystery, confidence, and danger. Layla was everything Adoma could never be: bold, fearless, untouchable, and willing to do what needed to be done. Alex lived as if the world existed for his pleasure. Money flowed through his hands like water, spent on expensive drinks, flashy cars, and an endless rotation of women he treated as disposable entertainment. He was loud, arrogant, and completely convinced of his own untouchability. Layla studied him like a scientist observing a specimen. She learned his patterns, which bars he frequented, what time he arrived, what drinks he preferred, how he approached women. She discovered his weaknesses, his ego, his predictability, his inability to see women as anything more than conquest. On the chosen evening, Layla entered his favorite private bar like a vision. Her golden dress caught the dim lights perfectly, shimmering with each graceful movement. Her perfume, expensive, intoxicating, announced her presence before she reached the counter. Every detail had been calculated to appeal to Alex's specific taste. He noticed immediately, exactly as planned. "Now that's what I call a beautiful evening," he announced loudly, wanting her to hear. Layla turned, meeting his eyes briefly with a practiced blend of shyness and interest. The hook was set. Within minutes, Alex approached, confidence radiating from his expensive suit and practiced smile. "Mind if I sit here?" "Not at all," Layla replied, her voice like honey. She played her role flawlessly, an escort seeking a man who could afford her refined taste. Alex's eyes glittered with predatory excitement. He thought he was the hunter. He didn't realize he was already caught. The evening progressed according to plan. Layla laughed at his jokes, touched his arm at precisely calculated moments, listened with apparent fascination to his boast about wealth and connections. By the time she suggested continuing at her place, Alex was desperate with anticipation. The apartment was prepared like a stage set, soft jazz, flickering candles, roses perfuming the air. "You have great taste," Alex said, removing his jacket. "Everything about you screams class." Layla smiled faintly. "I only give what men deserve." He missed the double meaning entirely, too consumed by his own desires. After his shower, he emerged wrapped in confidence and nothing else, laughing crudely as he sprawled on the bed. Layla approached slowly, reaching into her handbag. Her fingers closed around the cold surgical blade. In one swift, practiced movement, she struck. Alex's scream shattered the jazz music's serenity, his confidence transforming instantly into agony and terror. The bathroom had become a chamber of horrors. Alex sat bound to a chair, tape over his mouth muffling his desperate cries. His eyes, wide with terror and pain, tracked Layla's every movement. Beside him, Derek slumped in another chair, unconscious from sedatives, unaware of the nightmare he'd soon wake to. Layla moved through the apartment with clinical efficiency, her emotions carefully compartmentalized. In the kitchen, she prepared pepper soup with the same precision she'd once used for nursing duties. The aroma filled the apartment, rich, spicy, authentic. Anyone would find it appetizing. The key ingredients, however, would turn most stomachs. She worked methodically, her hands steady despite the gravity of what she was doing. The soup bubbled and simmered, pepper and spices creating a thick, flavorful broth that masked everything within. When finished, she packed it neatly into delivery containers, the kind used by upscale catering services throughout Lagos. A note, written in elegant handwriting on expensive cardstock, completed the presentation, from Alex. Enjoy. That evening, disguised in a catering uniform complete with branded cap and professional demeanor, Layla delivered the soup to Frank's mansion. The guards barely glanced at her, just another delivery person in a city full of them. Frank and his remaining friends, Derek and Leo, accepted the food with delighted surprise. Alex always knows how to show appreciation, Frank laughed, already reaching for a spoon. Leo inhaled deeply. This smells incredible. The pepper soup is perfect. They ate with enthusiasm, joking and talking between mouthfuls. Derek praised the rich flavor, noting how perfectly seasoned it was. Frank declared it the best pepper soup he'd had in months. They consumed every drop, scraping the containers clean, completely unaware of what they were truly eating. Layla watched from a distance, standing in shadows across from the mansion. City lights created a halo around the building where monsters lived and laughed. She could see their silhouettes through the windows, gesturing animatedly, enjoying their meal. One down, she whispered to herself, her face illuminated by Lagos's neon glow. 2 to go. Her expression remained calm, almost serene, but inside her, a fire burned, not hot and wild, but cold and controlled. This was no longer about revenge in the traditional sense. It had become about balance, about making men who treated women as disposable finally face consequences they'd always avoided. She turned and disappeared into the Lagos night, just another figure in a city of millions, carrying secrets that would haunt those men's final dreams. Frank was no longer sleeping well. His 3 closest associates had vanished, Alex, Derek, and Leo. Phone calls went unanswered. Offices stood empty. And then came the deliveries, packages with cryptic notes that grew increasingly threatening. The last one simply read, "Kings fall one by one." Fear had replaced his usual swagger. He double-checked locks obsessively, kept a loaded gun on his nightstand, and jumped at every unexpected sound. The mansion that once symbolized his power now felt like a cage, with shadows in every corner potentially hiding his hunters. He needed help from someone outside his corrupt network, someone skilled enough to find whoever was orchestrating his friends' disappearances. That's when he hired Detective Maya. Maya had a reputation throughout Lagos, brilliant, fearless, and incorruptible. She'd solved cases that others dismissed as impossible, operating with a moral clarity rare in a city where everything had a price. When she arrived at Frank's mansion, she noted his barely concealed panic despite his attempt at arrogance. "I need results, not excuses," Frank told her, trying to sound commanding. Maya studied him with the same intensity she applied to crime scenes, seeing through his facade immediately. "Then tell me everything from the beginning." Frank's initial story was sanitized, carefully edited to remove his own culpability. But Maya didn't survive in her profession by accepting surface narratives. She began her own investigation, pulling threads Frank didn't even know existed. What she discovered shocked even her seasoned instincts. Through discreet contact and careful document review, she uncovered an empire of exploitation, human trafficking, money laundering, and multiple disappearances of young women. Each crime was buried under layers of bribes and political connections, a systematic operation that had run unchecked for years. The deeper Maya dug, the clearer the picture became. This wasn't simple revenge, this was justice by other means, executed by someone who'd been failed by the system Maya represented. She realized she needed to find Adoma before Frank did, not to arrest her, but to understand what she'd stumbled into. This case had stopped being about protecting a client and started being about uncovering truth. Late one night, Maya waited near Adoma's apartment, watching as the transformed nurse returned home. When Adoma approached, Maya stepped from the shadows. "Leila, or should I say Adoma," Maya said softly. "We need to talk." The two women faced each other, one representing the law, the other representing those the law had abandoned. Neither knew yet that they might be on the same side. Maya and Adoma formed an uneasy alliance, bound by a shared enemy and a common goal. Maya provided Adoma with crucial intelligence, security layouts, Frank's schedule, the locations of hidden cameras. In return, Adoma shared the evidence she'd meticulously gathered, bank transfers, recorded conversations, testimonies she'd extracted from Alex and Derek before their fates were sealed. "Together, we can end this," Maya said, spreading documents across her desk. "But we do it right. We bring him down legally." Adoma nodded, though both women knew that the law had already failed once. This time, they would need to be smarter, faster, and willing to bend rules that had long been used against women like Chi. The trap was set for a Friday night. Adoma, once again transformed into Leila, would enter Frank's mansion under the pretense of being a new business associate. Maya would coordinate with a select team of officers she trusted, a rare commodity in Lagos's corrupt police force. But Frank had anticipated something. When Adoma entered his mansion that evening, the atmosphere felt wrong. The lights were too dim, the silence too calculated. She'd walked into countless dangerous situations over the past months, but this felt different. She was expected. "So, it's you," Frank's voice echoed from the shadows. He stepped into view, flanked by armed security guards, a pistol in his hand. "Adoma, my dear Chi's shadow. Did you really think you could win?" Adoma didn't flinch. She'd prepared for this possibility, mentally rehearsed this moment through countless sleepless nights. "You destroyed my sister. You destroyed lives. Tonight it ends." Frank laughed, a sound without warmth or humanity. "Your sister got what she deserved. A man like me doesn't love girls like her." Something inside Adoma shattered, the last restraint she'd maintained, the final pretense of control. With a scream that carried months of anguish and rage, she lunged at him. A gunshot exploded through the mansion, deafening in the marble hall. At that precise moment, Maya burst through the main entrance, weapon drawn, her team flooding in behind her. "Drop it, Frank." Chaos erupted. Security guards opened fire. Maya's team returned fire. Adoma grabbed the decorative vase and smashed it across a guard's head with satisfying force. The mansion transformed into a battlefield, years of injustice colliding with the desperate pursuit of accountability. Through the chaos, Adoma's eyes never left Frank. This ended tonight, one way or another. The morning light crept through Frank's shattered mansion windows like a reluctant witness to the carnage. Glass crunched under Detective Maya's boots as she stood on the couch, her bandaged arm throbbing with pain but her mind clear. The gunshot wound had been superficial, she'd been lucky. Beside her on the glass table lay a note in Adoma's elegant handwriting. "Thank you for saving me. You wanted justice. Now you have it. The evidence is yours." Maya's phone buzzed. An email from an anonymous address contained everything: bank transfers documenting years of money laundering, photographs of trafficking operations, recorded conversations with political officials, and testimony videos from victims too afraid to come forward publicly. It was comprehensive, irrefutable, devastating. Frank sat slumped in a chair across the room, zip-tied and bleeding from a shoulder wound. His arrogance had bled out with his blood, leaving only a broken man who finally understood that power had limits. Within hours, the story exploded across every media outlet in Nigeria. Business mogul Frank Dyke arrested for human trafficking and assault. Criminal empire exposed behind charity foundation. News helicopter circled his mansion. Reporters crowded the gates, shouting questions into cameras that broadcast his fall to millions. By noon, police had conducted coordinated raids across Lagos. Alexis and Derek's bodies were discovered in the apartment, along with evidence of their crimes. Leo was arrested trying to flee to Ghana. Bank accounts were frozen. Political allies scrambled to distance themselves. The entire network that had seemed untouchable collapsed like a house of cards. Maya stood silently as officers led Frank away in handcuffs, his head hung low, cameras flashing. A crowd had gathered outside, protesters holding signs demanding justice for the victims. Some were crying. Some were cheering. All were witnessing something rare, actual accountability. "You think this changes anything?" Frank muttered as he passed Maya. She met his gaze without flinching. "Yes. Because people like you finally learned that power has an end." But one question haunted Maya as the police cars drove away: where was Adoma? She searched for days: hospitals, airports, safe houses. Every lead turned cold. Adoma had vanished as completely as Layla had appeared months earlier. Then an email arrived, anonymous, untraceable. It contained a single photograph: Adoma and Chi sitting side by side on an airplane, holding hands, gazing out the window at clouds. Below the image, a caption read, "Some justice is not found in courtrooms. It's found in peace." Maya smiled sadly and closed her laptop. "Rest, Adoma," she whispered. "You've done enough." Far above the clouds, an airplane glided through endless blue. Inside, Adoma sat beside Chi, both dressed simply, no wigs or disguises anymore. Just two sisters who had survived hell together. Chi turned to Adoma, tears in her eyes. "You did it, Ada." Adoma shook her head gently. "No. We did it." She paused, staring at her reflection in the window. "But I wish it hadn't come to this." "At least it's over," Chi said softly. "He can't hurt anyone else." Adoma nodded, watching clouds drift past. On the small screen before them, silent news footage showed Frank being led away, his empire crumbling. For the first time in months, Adoma felt her heart still, not at peace yet, but still. She reached for Chi's hand and held it tightly. "Maybe now," she whispered, "we can finally heal." Chi leaned her head on her sister's shoulder. The plane's hum filled the comfortable silence between them, no longer heavy with grief, but fragile with hope. As the aircraft soared higher, sunlight poured through the window, bathing the sisters in gold. Somewhere ahead lay a new beginning, though the shadows of the past would follow them always. But they would face it together. They always had. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. Also drop your thoughts in the comment section. Remain blessed.